Off-season edition, first one here. First off-season overreaction of 2025. Let's get it.
It's a fine line between, drinking wine and squashing grapes, as we say in this business, and sometimes it's very subtle.
All right, Nick. Hit me with them.
Yeah, let's kick it off with this one. The Steelers should move on from Minkah Fitzpatrick this offseason because $22 million is too much for a deterrent that is suddenly getting targeted a lot.
Yeah, that is not an overreaction. It's not. It's just plain and simple. If the Pittsburgh Steelers moved on from Minkah Fitzpatrick, we might have hit the crossroads where production and value no longer meet, and trading him in might get you a better outcome. And I think that that's where the Steelers stand. Will they? I don't expect them to. I think that's pretty far down on the list of possibilities for the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason. Should they? There's an argument to be made. I'm not going to say that's an overreaction at all. Minkah Fitzpatrick's got to go, and you get a first-round pick from Minkah Fitzpatrick, you make that deal. You don't even think about it.
When your $160 million defense looks as bad as it did there, and Minkah's 22 of that next year, and he played better than people are giving him credit for because he was a deterrent for most of the season. He did make a lot of touchdown-saving tackles. That's just not enough for that much money, especially when you could invest that in the offensive side of the football, which desperately needs it, especially when you could potentially go out there and get somebody else for cheaper, like you did in Deshaun Elliott, who came in and was immediately a massive, massive piece. We were talking about him as the number 3 piece on the Steelers defense all season long. And that was what? He's the 7th, 8th highest paid guy on the unit. So sometimes you need better value. And I think that's just where you're at. Like you mentioned, the value is not reaching the play at this point with Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I think you could get a lot from Minkah Fitzpatrick this offseason. Will they? Probably not. But somebody calls, you got to listen. You got to listen. Not an overreaction.
Let's go over to the next one here. Offensive side of the football. Pat Freiermuth's struggles late in this season are a major red flag for this offense moving forward.
No, I don't say that's. I would say that's an overreaction. I would say that's I think Pat Freiermuth in an offense that is driven towards him works very well. And yeah, like I get it. He had a drop against Cincinnati, a big one. That was huge. But I look at Pat the same way I look at everybody and say, yeah, Pat didn't play well at the end of the season, but neither did George Pickens. You're not talking about him not being a wide receiver 1. Like, you're talking about a potential trade because of the contract situation. But if there was no contract situation, George Pickens wouldn't be a worry on anybody's mind this offseason. It'd be, how good could George be next year? I think Pat's the same boat. Like, when everybody except for Cam Hayward looked bad, you can't pick one guy out and say you are a red flag. No, I would say Pat's going to be fine. Acknowledge the struggles at the end of there, especially the last 3 games. Definitely. Worried about it? No. I'm going to say that's an overreaction.
Yeah, he just signed a pretty big contract. So it's something I'm going to be keeping my eyes on because when the road got narrow, when the games got big, he had that fumble against the Chiefs late that kind of pushed it out of reach. He had that drop in that pivotal moment, even though he had a phenomenal game that would have put him over 100 yards on the game against Cincinnati. And then he had that drop early in the Ravens game. It just felt like in these big moments, when the offense is finally starting to get geared towards you, you have to make the plays in those moments. So again, I'm willing to give him a second shot because I think he had overall a pretty good year. And I think he could build in this offense if Arthur Smith sticks around. But it is something that I'm filing away in the back of my mind of, hey, whenever things start to get pivotal next year, let's see what happens with Pat Freiermuth because they're paying him a lot of money. He needs to be able to be clutch, especially in a position that has been very pivotal to good football teams in this league.
I agree. But if the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is living and dying off of a tight end that catches 3 passes a game,
well,
they're in trouble.
You're hoping he catches more, but let's move on to the next one here. The Steelers need another veteran starting offensive lineman besides Isaac Seumalo on next year's offensive line.
I would say that's also an overreaction, but I'll give you an asterisk with it. I think the Steelers need a different veteran offensive lineman that isn't Isaac Seumalo. I think Isaac Seumalo is fine, but I could see an argument to be made that if the Pittsburgh Steelers said we're re-signing James Daniels and to a 1-year prove-it deal, we're getting rid of Isaac Seumalo and we're going to move Mason to the left side. Okay, why not? Why wouldn't you test that out? I think if the Steelers want to do this correctly, they try to go out and get a younger guard to replace Isaac and build their offensive line from there. They have their veteran in whoever that is, Broderick and Troy, and Mason McCormick and Zach Frazier. And I think that works out way better long-term because right now the Steelers have a billion needs and they're going to have to use draft picks on draft picks to get those needs over the next couple of years. And they will have another quarterback need a couple of years from now, unless they go get Jalen Milroe or someone. You can't be wasting draft picks high on guards, 2 years from now. Go and then hoping that they work out immediately. Not going to happen. I think changing the veteran is a possibility. Adding another one, I don't think is the move for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would say that's an overreaction.
What would you think about the return of Nate Herbig as potentially that other veteran, though?
I wouldn't be upset about it, but I don't think it raises, like, Nate Herbig's not going to start over Isaac, and I like Spencer. Like, I would bring back Nate. I think that's fine. If I had to guess, they're going to bring back Ryan McCollum, and him and Spencer Anderson are going to be the swing guys. But if you want to bring back Nate too and make him the swing guy, him and Spencer could compete for that roster spot on game days and the other one's inactive, fine. If that's what you want to do. If you want to make Spencer a swing tackle, fine. That's great. I like that. But I think you need a starter quality guard to replace Isaac if you're going to go in that direction.
All righty. I have one more, then we got a bunch of listener overreactions. My last one, TJ Watt can no longer make a major impact by staying stationary on the left side.
That one's true. That is not an overreaction. I think TJ Watt can make a massive impact, but I also think that, like, you can't make a massive impact if 2-3 guys are blocking you on every single play. He acknowledged that. The good news here is that TJ will be moving around next year. TJ will have an impact. TJ will find ways to make this happen. TJ Watt, this is the thing. TJ Watt is not one of the greatest defensive players of his generation just to fall off a cliff at 30 years old and suck. Like, no, that's not how it is. And TJ Watt had 11.5 sacks this year. And it was a bad year for TJ Watt. That's a huge year for most players. I mean, that's Alex Highsmith's second greatest year in the NFL. You have to take that into account. I just don't think TJ is going to disappear. I think he's going to be just fine. But I agree with you. He's got to move around. And I expect him to move around a lot in 2025. That is not an overreaction.
All right, let's jump to some listener overreactions. Steel749 says this team will never win another playoff game under Mike Tomlin.
Oh, that might be an overreaction. It might be, because just as worrisome as Mike Tomlin is, and I get it, just as worrisome as Mike Tomlin is, his roster also sucked in a lot of ways. Like, that offense was bad, really bad by the end of it. The defense struggled and there were clear holes there. When was the last time Mike Tomlin had a Super Bowl roster? That's a question to ask. I'm not trying to take the blame away from him. It's just the overreaction and how we have to address it. I think it's an overreaction because of these things. Because, like, what happens if the Steelers get a Super Bowl caliber roster? Are they a Super Bowl team? Maybe. Do they win a playoff game? Maybe. I think that's a possibility. I think this year's roster and last year's roster were really bad. Like, really, really bad. It's been a minute since the Pittsburgh Steelers have had a good roster, like a while. Even the 12-0 start in 2020. Like, where's Chase Claypool again? Where's Juju Smith-Schuster again? Like, what do you got going on there? Nothing. Almost nothing. I think that's where it gets a little confusing. Look at these results. People are making free money betting on sports, making thousands every month. The secret? They're using OddsJam. OddsJam isn't just another betting app. It's turning the entire system in your favor. OddsJam uses a strategy called arbitrage, finding odds differences across sportsbooks. Bet both sides, and no matter the outcome, you will profit. Here's an example. You put $500 on Boise State to win on FanDuel and $335 on their opponent San Francisco on DraftKings. You're guaranteed to make $50 win or lose. With the OddsJam mobile app, you get real-time alerts on these opportunities every day. People are making thousands monthly. To get you started, use our code ALLSteelersTalk for 35% off and a 7-day free trial. I guarantee you'll profit during that trial, and if you don't, cancel with one click, no questions asked. Don't leave money on the table. Go to oddsjam.com, use our code ALLSteelersTalk, and start making money the smart way.
All right, let's go to our buddy Carl Spackler, who says Art Rooney steps down as president and gives his son the reins before the 2026 draft.
2026? I mean, that's like not an over. I haven't heard anything, but that's not an overreact. Art Rooney's what? Got to be pushing 80 years old. He's got to be up there. Like, you know, you got to think that at any year, Art Rooney could say,
72.
That's way younger than I thought Art Rooney was. Way younger, actually. Shout out Art Rooney, man. That dude, I'm not trying to say that he looks old. He doesn't. I just, you know, I didn't know. 72, I think he might have a couple more years in him, but you never. Art Rooney's the same age as Bill Belichick. How? A year younger, actually, than Bill Belichick. That's actually pretty nuts to think about. Like, I would say no. I would say that's probably an overreaction, but anything could happen. Anything could happen. And 72 years old, you just never know when you feel like calling it quits.
Let's go over to Matthew Torres, who says next year's schedule is way more difficult than this year's based on the teams that we face, and Mike Tomlin will have his first losing season if things don't change this offseason, resulting in his firing.
All right. Yep. That's an overreaction. It was good. You had me on the hinge there. You had me in the first half. You definitely had me in the first half. And then the second you said losing season, well, that doesn't happen in Pittsburgh. Okay. That doesn't happen. Do we care about it anymore? No, nobody cares about winning seasons, but it's also the easiest bet you could place at the beginning of the year. Like if you could log on to DraftKings every year and say 8.5 over everything in my account, and you're going to hit it. It's a guarantee. It's the easiest bet you make every single year. On top of that, Mike Tomlin ain't getting fired, pal. He ain't getting fired. I was called Sunday, and I talked to some people on Sunday just to kind of see where the Steelers organization was. And I was told a couple of times, and I even talked to people today, like Tomlin and Rooney have continued to meet, and there is a lot of confidence in Mike Tomlin in that building. Do I agree with it? I'm not saying that I do. I'm just saying this is an overreaction because Art Rooney met with Tomlin today and feels very okay. I'm very confident in Mike Tomlin. And it just, it just doesn't feel like that's going to happen. So overreaction.
All right, let's go to the Soul Poetic, who says the Steelers will take 2 Ohio State offensive players in this year's draft. Travion Henderson at running back and Will Howard at quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, had me in the first half. You had me in the first half. We were there. Overreaction. I don't think the Steelers want Will Howard. I also don't think the Steelers, unless it's Jalen Milroe, okay, because I think he has an opportunity to slide deep enough where you make a move for him. But if that's not the case, I don't think the Steelers touch a quarterback in this draft. I just don't. There's no need to. You know, why would that's what they're trying to avoid. That why would you go get another Kenny Pickett? Well, you're not looking for Kenny Pickett. You're looking for, you're looking for Ben Roethlisberger. You're not going to find Ben Roethlisberger in the 4th round of a bad draft. So overreact. You had me in the first half. Overreaction.
All right, let's jump into some of these live overreactions, starting with Josh, who says the Steelers O-line needs completely overhauled and trading for Patrick Queen was an absolute bust.
They didn't trade for Patrick Queen. They signed him. But the Steelers O-line does not need a complete overhaul. They needed a complete overhaul a couple of years ago, and then they did it. That's why this is an overreaction. They've already done this. They They did the overhaul. Now they have 2 first-round tackles, a second-round center, and a 4th-round guard on top of a Super Bowl winning guard on the other side. They just need them to grow because they've been in the league a combined 2 years. And that's not enough time. These are offensive linemen. They take a minute to develop. And I think they did the overhaul. Now it's about, is the overhaul going to work? We won't know that until next season and maybe the season after that. But they did the overhaul. If you do another overhaul, you're just going to look like you look this season. It's going to look exactly the same. As for Patrick Queen, I don't know how I feel about that one. I feel like, yeah, there's potentially was a bust. Potentially it didn't work out well. But I also think at times he looked way better than what the Steelers had. And, you weren't going to go out there with Landon Roberts and Peyton Wilson and Mark Robinson and feel okay. So, yes and no. He's so cheap that it was like it's hard to say yes. But the first part of this overreaction.
Josh has another one here. Says, overreaction. The Steelers don't have the coaching staff to develop Fields into a franchise elite quarterback.
I would also say this is an overreaction. I feel like I have a lot of faith in Tom Arth. I like what I've heard about Tom Arth. I like what I've seen from Tom Arth. I just feel like he's got a really good reputation in the NFL. And if he could do it, like, I'm going to put faith in him potentially being able to do it. On top of that, you got to remember, like, I get it. Arthur Smith struggled this season. Arthur Smith has developed a quarterback before. Like, he made Ryan Tannehill still relevant in the NFL when Ryan Tannehill was not relevant in the NFL. I get it. He didn't do it in Atlanta, but like, was Desmond Ridder and Tyler Heineke supposed to be the answer there? Neither of those guys did anything since and won't do anything ever again. So I think that Tom Arth gives me faith. That's why this is an overreaction. If it was just Tomlin, I agree with you, but I would say this is an overreaction.
Let's go over to David, who says, hire Hines Ward for wide receiver coach and James Harrison as defensive assistant in some capacity. Bring back those hard dudes and let them mold the mindset of our young guys.
Yeah, Hines, as a wide receiver coach, I wouldn't be totally against. James, I would be all for. James Harrison has asked to coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's reached out. He's given feelers. Why would you not bring him back? Like, Vince Williams is here. Brian Shazier is here. Give James Harrison an opportunity to do the same thing. I think it works out. This isn't an overreaction. I like both of these guys, and I think they'd be good coaches in small capacities. Hines Ward has done it. He's got a resume. I don't know if it works in the NFL, and I like Zach Azzani. I think what Zach Azzani did with Calvin Austin this season is very impressive. And, we'll see what happens next year, but he's got a good track record too. I still think this isn't an overreaction.
Zach Azzani's time in Pittsburgh is going to be defined by what Roman Wilson does next year and what their rookie wide receiver that I believe they're going to draft ends up doing in his rookie season.
Yes, 100%. And I mean, his track record is Garrett Wilson, Cortland Sutton. Like, he's got names. He's done it.
Let's go over to Isaac and finish off Overreaction Tuesday with this. Getting rid of Russ means that Arthur Smith should be gone, and we should hire Eric Bieniemy to restart the defense with him and Fields.
Okay, I like Eric Bieniemy. I do. But there's got to be a reason that Eric Bieniemy is not welcomed anywhere else in the NFL except for Kansas City. There has to be. I'm not saying I know what the reason is. I'm just saying, like, it's strange, right? It's strange that he has just been exiled from any team outside of Kansas City, that nobody wants to touch him. Then he spent a year in Washington and it didn't work out. Like, right? Like, it just feels like they know something we don't. He interviewed for head coaching jobs 1 year, didn't get any, was never offered a head coaching job or an interview ever again. It's just strange. So I would say this is an overreaction. I think you give Arthur Smith time with Justin Fields. I liked what Arthur Smith did when Justin Fields was the starting quarterback. I thought the adjustments were way better. I thought his ability to utilize different plays were way better. I just felt like the offense was way more open. And with Russ, it just completely became one-dimensional, and it didn't work. So I would say this is an overreaction kind of for both parts. Bieniemy, there's got to be something there, man. There's got to be something with Bieniemy.
I'll tell you one thing that would be really interesting. The way that he coaches is aggressive him and George Pickens on a practice field would
not work.
It would not. I mean,
either that,
it would either work extremely well because it would force George Pickens to be put in his place, or it's just going to blow up and go absolutely awful.
Yeah. Either way, I would be
in that hypothetical, I should say.
Yeah, in the hypothetical. And I'd be there to watch. I would never miss. I'd be freezing cold, just being like, all right, practice time. We're watching. Just standing next to the wide receivers the whole time. Yeah.
He holds his guys accountable. That is 100% true.